What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Wednesday night's Mythic Conversations. As always, I am your host, Jeremy Gerard. I'm a Mythic Legions collector and customizer who also has the distinct privilege of being the director of sales and marketing for Four Horsemen Studios. I'm here every single Wednesday night, or most Wednesday nights, doing this show live where we talk about all things Legions. And we've got something big to talk about tonight because it is that time of year again, the time of year that so many people love and other people actually kind of dread a little bit because it gets crazy in the Mythic Legions community. Of course, I am talking about Mythic Legions All-Stars voting season. This past Monday, we announced that voting starts this coming Friday. I'm going to talk about all the particulars around the vote in a moment. But we also released the roster. And to talk about that roster, to answer some questions about All-Stars, I wanted to bring in a guest tonight, someone who I think is going to approach this from maybe a different perspective than I approach it from. Should make for a very good conversation. I want to bring up my guest this evening. Say hello, everyone, to Big Dub. Dub, how are you tonight?
I am great, Jeremy. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to be here and talk about All-Stars.
I'm excited to have you here talking about All-Stars. This is going to be a lot of fun. So before we get into the topic, you and I met for the first time. I had seen your channel prior to this. I knew who you were. I saw you in the community, but we got a chance to actually meet and hang out a little bit recently down at Toylanta. That was the first time that I got to meet you, some of your crew and your wonderful family. Tell my viewers who may not be familiar with you a little bit about who you are and where they can learn more about you and kind of the videos that you post.
Sure, thanks. So we do family kind of nerd videos right here on YouTube, Big Dub, just like you see it spelled on the thing. And so for years, I've been on YouTube, I don't know, 5 or 6 years now. And it started off because I would travel a lot for work. And so I got access to almost every toy store you can think of. I'd be in a different city and I'd check it out. And I thought, well, hey, I'm doing this. I'm getting to stay in nice hotels. I should document this really more as a home video for me, honestly, and my friends. And then as it's evolved and now I'm engaged and we have our daughter, and now it's more of a the nerdy family type of thing. And we go to lots of conventions and we have lots of toys and we do a lot of stuff together. So we're every Sunday at noon and have been for many years. And we just put out vlogs, take you with us. And it's still home videos. A lot of people watch. I like that. But really, it's so we can watch it and relive our times together.
Awesome. Yeah, great. Check out that channel. It's definitely a lot of fun. Great spirit, great content. Like you said, every single week. That's cool, too. The fact that it's so regular. There's always new stuff coming out. Now, you've been aware of Mythic Legions. You've collected, we were talking about this before we started the show. You collected, a little bit more passively this particular line. Obviously, you're a huge collector overall. You've got a giant collection. But you somewhat more recently really took a more serious plunge into Mythic Legions, correct?
That's right. Yeah. So the first ones I bought were Adamon and Keltis when they were just sitting on Big Bad Toy Store. It's hard to believe now. They just sat there for a long time. And because I'm an 80s kid, so Motu and that kind of stuff appealed to me. I thought they were cool. Then I had Etheron's Dozen because they were cool birds.
Yep.
And then kind of passively here and there picking things up. And then when COVID happened in 2020, I had every Marvel Legends ever, every Figure Arts ever, everything ever. I had like 300 Hot Toys. It is out of control. And I evaluated, what am I going to do? I sold a ton of stuff, did things like pay off the car and, put the money into good things. And then right after that, we went into a Toylanta pretty soon thereafter, and had a great experience with a number of customizers, and met Walter for the first time, and
Yeah.
really got re-engaged with this community much more actively. And then this past year, where we met at Toylanta, deciding to dive into, okay, I think I can paint these things and take them apart and do all that stuff. So
Yeah.
I've been Legions adjacent for a number of years, but a lot more active here in the last 18 months or so.
Okay. Now, you are a big toy collector. You've got a lot of different stuff. You are a completist, right? You are someone who, as much as possible, wants to get a complete line, correct?
I mean, it's not yes. I don't love that about myself. It goes way back to being a kid. Even as a kid, I had every Ninja Turtle, and I wanted my
Yep.
parents to help me get on card and loose. And that checklist. Oh, I don't have
Yeah,
that one. Oh, I've got these 10. It's expensive, but it's the way
it
it
is,
is.
but it's an interesting aspect because there are so many different kinds of Legions collectors, and that's one of the things we'll talk about tonight as we go through some of the stuff with All Stars. Because I think different kinds of Legions collectors approach All Stars differently, regardless of what kind of collector you are. Someone like yourself who is a completist, All Stars is a unique kind of program that Four Horsemen Studios has. The fact that we not only reissue older figures that have not been available, in some cases for 8, 9 years or whatever, and we allow the fans to vote on them. I think that's a very unique and engaging type program for the fans. And for someone like yourself who's trying to hunt down some of those last pieces, the opportunity to potentially get a reissue of those at original retail prices, $37, $50, that's got to be very exciting.
It is. I mean, I think I collect enough things that I would say I'm a pretty big expert on just what at least modern toy lines do. And outside of really onesie twosie exceptions for a convention fan vote type thing, no one does this every year, and especially with the items that are often in the most demand, they just go remake them themselves without asking for votes, so they can get your money instead of
Yep.
eBay. That's what it feels, especially with certain companies. So it's
Yep.
very unique, and it is. I mean, when I look at this list, and in my kind of ranking, I'm like, all right, first of all, what's going to cost me the most to get if it doesn't win? Now, will that be the thing that drives my decision? Maybe, maybe not, but it is certainly the first thing my brain thinks of because of the completionist nature.
Okay. Yeah, it definitely is a unique program. You're totally right there. And it's something where, for those people that may not be aware, All Stars started a number of years ago after the first Mythic Legions wave. And one of the things that I'm in a unique position to actually talk about is a bit about the behind the scenes stuff with All Stars. Because definitely the most recent waves, I've had a really big hand in terms of running the vote and even selecting the roster of who's going to be there, putting that together, working with the studio team to iron it out and figure out who stays and who goes. Early on, because Mythic Legion since day one has always been about pre-orders, that first wave, as you can expect, by the time that it came out, there were a lot of people that were new to the line. There were a lot of people that had, skipped some in the Kickstarter that now wanted them. So certain figures just spiked up in price, whether they were super desirable or whether they were just very short printed in the first run because they weren't super desirable. So the idea of All Stars was to really get those reissues out there, somewhat quickly. That first All Stars wave, All Stars 1, that was selected by the studio totally. Since then, every other wave has been chosen by the fans. All Stars 2 definitely had some funky stuff going on. That used a different voting system where there were people that were clearly trying to game that system. But since All Stars 3, we've used a program called Survey Monkey. So Survey Monkey. We use that, and it really locks it down. So before we get into like the looking at the characters, just to give people a bit of an insight into how this is going to work. Anybody who has either subscribed to the newsletter at Stole Horseman or made a purchase. If you've made a purchase since the Alithia wave, which obviously some time ago, you are on the mailing list. You will get an email on Friday from SurveyMonkey. You have to click the link in the email, which makes it so you can only vote one time. You're going to be able to vote. We're going to show the roster in a few minutes. You're going to be able to vote on 2 different questions, the main attraction and the alumni wave. And what's going to happen is we only have a certain number of votes we can tabulate in SurveyMonkey. We've never hit that number, but Legions fans surprise me all the time. Who knows? Maybe we'll hit it. If we hit that limit, then voting ends. If we don't hit that limit, then voting will be shut down. We'll close the ballots next Friday. This Friday, probably around 11-ish, is where we're going to send those emails.
You'll have to pay attention for voteclavian1@gmail.com, signing up for the newsletter. Voteclavian2 at gmail.
Yeah, you got to look at all those people that signed up in the last week since we announced this.
I would be curious. It may not be something you can share, but when we're on social media, in whatever thing that we talk about on social media, it tends to be an echo chamber, right? Because we have friends that like us. I would be curious, comparatively speaking to the number of newsletters that go out versus the folks in the cabal, it's very possible that votes could be entirely swung by people that you never interact with on social media because they collect quietly and they're not on Facebook. I know several of my friends that are on Facebook that collect.
Yep. One of the points I actually wanted to make today is exactly what you're saying is the communities that we are a part of. So many of us are a part of the Cabal. The Cabal is the official fan community of Mythic Legions. But the Cabal is a very specific group. It only represents a percentage of the overall Legions community. I think we both know that the Cabal skews very customizer heavy. There's a lot of customizers in there. There's a lot of focus on the specific parts that figures include. Customizers make up a small percentage of the overall fan base. So you are right to your point. When we are in something like the Cabal, even more so, some of the new subgroups that are popping up, the Kings Under the Mountain with the dwarves, the Malignancy with the goblins, those are absolutely echo chambers where I've seen in the Cabal in past years, they'll do a poll of who are you voting for? And characters that are like number 2 on that list are number 7 on the actual vote. So it definitely, when you go to the community as a whole, everything's not always the same. Some stuff is. Last year, Romulus won the vote, hands down. Romulus was also very popular in the Cabal vote. So there are times where they do line up, but not always.
Yeah, it was interesting.
One of the things I'll say to you as well, Dub, is that we like the vote. And, one of the themes I'm going to talk about a lot tonight is vote for the ones you want to buy. Like, vote for the figures. There's so many ways you can vote, but at the end of the day, no matter how you approach it, vote for figures you want to purchase. Because one of the things that we at the studio use this for as well is the top 3 in that main category are going to get made as Mythic Legions All-Stars. But if we see a character that does really, really well, or types of characters that do really, really well, this is all incredibly useful sales data that we take in and use it to fuel some of our potential decisions in terms of the kinds of characters we may make or the types of figures we may also want to reissue in the future.
Yeah. I mean, anytime there's a survey going out, that's valuable to folks, especially like you in your world. Yeah, I did wonder, did it help shape? Did the way voting goes, whether racist factions, whatever, does it? It certainly can't have a negative influence on decisions. It may not necessarily shape them, but it's valuable input.
It is. It absolutely is. And For instance, last year, one of the things that we did was we separated the vote. So last year we did 2 rounds of voting. This year's only 1 round. I'll be very clear, 1 round of voting. Last year we did the vote where we had round 1, you had to vote for a hero, a villain, and a 2.0 character. And one of the reasons we did that is 2.0 characters don't tend to perform very well in the votes. They tend to be some of the lower vote getters. It's always those 1.0 figures, which it's kind of almost unfair because a lot of people vote for the oldest and most expensive figures, which means it's from the first few waves. There were no 2.0 in the first few waves. So when you're voting for things almost exclusively from, Mythic Legions 1 or 1.5, you're never going to get to those 2.0 figures. We wanted to get a sense of the types of figures that people actually did like and did want. Once we got through that first round, we used that as preliminaries. Then we whittled it down from 20 to 10, and then it was a battle royale, vote for your top 3. But yeah, sales data like that or survey data like that really does help us make decisions in the future because it gives us a sense beyond just what fans purchase of what they may be interested in for the future.
Yeah, that makes sense. I noticed a good representation of 2.0 this time around.
There is, and that's one of the things. So let me bring this up. It's funny. So you've seen all of the campaigning in the Cabal, I'm sure, right?
Oh, I love it. I love it. So, and don't worry, I'm making campaign videos that'll go out next week. I'm getting in on this fun. I love it.
I was talking to a new Legions collector the other day, and he was like, "Oh my goodness, this is insane." And I said to him, I was like, "Is this your first All-Stars vote?" And he said, "Yes, it is." And I was like, "Oh my goodness." People that are new, I think this is a love it or hate it type experience. There are some people that like mute the Cabal during the voting because they just like, I don't want to see all this.
And there picture of Magnus doing the walk of shame.
Oh,
it's so funny.
There are other people that just love it. They absolutely love it. So what we have here, this is the breakdown. This is the 2 questions. So the first group of 20 combatants, you're going to get to pick 3 characters from that group. The top 3 overall vote getters will be made. They will be added to Mythic Legions All-Star 6. But this is the first year, the wrinkle that we threw in this year. Previously, we had always said if a character has been an All-Star, they're not eligible to be an All-Star again. Well, some of those original All-Stars, specifically the All-Stars 1 and 2 figures, those were years ago that those came out. And some of those are very desirable and hard to find these days. So we decided to do an All-Stars alumni vote. And one of the reasons we were able to do this, of course, every year when we plan out All-Stars, for the last few years, All-Stars has included the PowerCon debut figures, right?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
This was the first year we didn't have to reserve 2 spots for them. So this year, we were able, because the PowerCon debut figures made their way into Cosmic Legions, we opened up some new spaces. So the last couple of years, we've had 3 All-Star winners. This year, we had the main 3, but rather than just give people a 4th one, we said, let's bring in an alumni. Let's have 4 different characters that have been made in the past, and we'll actually allow them to vote on that. And we'll reissue a character for the 2nd time as an All-Star.
Yeah, I think it's awesome. Because even for no matter how you collect, a statement like that helps with secondary markets in general, right? Because we believe a rule to be this now becomes unobtainable, and then maybe it could be obtainable. We have to vote it in, and certainly there's a lot of figures that have won All-Stars over the years. Yep. But it helps. But I also I just think it's cool to have a different tier like that. They're all like, because if you just put them all in there, 3 out of those 4 would win. Those would be the winners if they were not in their own tier like that.
They possibly would. Yep. They're big ones. So let me tell you a little bit about how we select this roster, because I do think that makes a lot of sense, because inevitably there are going to be people that say, why isn't this character in there? Why isn't that character? They should be in there. when we build these rosters, there's a couple rules that we have. So the first one we just talked about, if they're a past all-star, they're not eligible, except for that alumni vote. So characters that have been made in the past as all-stars, we're not going to put them back in the vote, the main vote. Number two, over the last few years, we've moved away from Legion builders. So if you've noticed the voting roster for the last few years, there have been no actual Legion builders. And when I say Legion builders, let me be very clear. I'm talking about a product category and not a generic character. There's always some confusion with that. A Legion builder are like what we saw in reinforcements, characters that have fewer paint applications and are therefore a lower price point, versus a character like, say, Fury Clan Orc or Shadow Elf. They're a fully painted figure. They're a regularly standard priced figure, but they're not a named character. Any of those lower paint app Legion builders, we don't put them in. In the last category are major characters who are more in line for a 2.0 version than a straight reissue. So this is why Otho is not in the voting. The introduction of 2.0 characters has been something that's really, really refreshing for the line. So we don't want to reissue a character if we know that there's a chance. There doesn't have to be plans, but if there's a chance that we would want to at some point bring them back as a new version, that's what we want to focus on. Because a few years ago, we actually saw that happen where Baron Voligar won the All-Star vote.
Yep.
And unfortunately, we already had plans for Baron Voligar 2. In retrospect, he probably shouldn't even have been in the vote because we knew another one was coming out. We want to avoid that going forward. So that's why some of those popular or those named characters that are actually important parts of the lore, they aren't put into the actual wave or the vote.
So in saying that, is it, and I know you probably can't confirm things like this, but is it relatively safe to have an understanding that things like just elf and orc and goblin and those builders over the years are at least in consideration for other reinforcement lines and things like
Yes.
that? That's why they're not included here, because there's other means to get those to the fans.
That is the biggest reason why they got moved out, because we introduced reinforcements, which kind of took the place of having Legion builders in All-Stars. So you saw reinforcements, you saw that we reissued a number of figures as part of that. We haven't officially said we're doing reinforcements too. We're doing reinforcements too. It's going to happen. So some of those figures that people may want, there are plans for them down the road, whether they're in that particular wave or a future one. That is dubbed exactly why we've moved those out of this.
Well, for me at least, that helps clarify, because it really narrows down the available pool of figures. And so a lot of things fall into already been reissued, or is going to get an update, or is going to come reissued through a different path potentially. And so your pool is actually a lot more narrow than one would think looking at this.
It is. And so now the other thing that we do here is when we come up with this group, we try to draw from, obviously we're going back. So we know that people want the older, more expensive figures. I will tell you one thing I don't do. We don't fire up eBay prices and say, what are the most expensive figures to get? Because that's not always the best way to sell product. Case in point, last year, Azar, the Yellow Demon, was one of the winners of the All-Star vote. Azar at the time was probably the most expensive of those All-Star figures on eBay. Very hard to find and very desirable because he was an important character. His brother Zazar was out. The combined form as Hazar was coming. Everything was queued up that figure was super desirable. He was the least selling figure in the All-Stars 5 wave by quite a bit, actually. So prices on the secondary market don't necessarily always equate to desirability for the reissue itself.
Well, I would imagine if at least years ago, if a thing was rare enough to command a high aftermarket, it's because it didn't sell well to begin with. And so therefore there's less. and the demand has to be less because there's a very little supply. So for you trying to sell X number of new ones, there may be only 10 buyers for that out there, and they're willing to pay $1,000, but there's no other buyers willing to pay $50 for it.
Yep. This is actually a good statement. Kirby saying, I take some issue here. Otho's more important than King Noglin, the king of the most numerous army in Mythos, and he's unworthy of a V2. I simply can't accept those statements. So one of the things to remember is Noglin, I think, is a great figure as is. There's so many things we'd want to do in Otho 2.0 that I don't know we have as many updates that we'd want for, Noglin 2.0, because we don't just want them to be Noglin in a different disguise or a different costume or something. You saw like with Gideon Heavensbrand, he's in technically the same outfit, but we improved him in so many ways. So it's not only the importance of the character itself, because Noglin and Bromden are both actually somewhat important characters, in the overall story of Mythos, but those figures are also excellent figures. So they're less likely to get a 2.0 because the 1.0 is so good. Not saying they won't ever, but that's part of it.
Yeah. Yeah, because at this point in time, is there enough refreshing and updates you can do to make it worth it? I'd imagine most 2.0s are going to come out of that Kickstarter wave, at least in the earliest days.
Now, so we look at old waves, but we also look at races. One of the great things about Mythic Legions in the realm of Mythos is the racial diversity that you find. So when we come up with these 20 characters, we want there to be different races. We want there to be different genders. So we want both some female characters and some males, different build types. We want, the shorter ones like the dwarves. We want, the barbarian. We want a variety of different characters for people to choose from. So that's a reason, for instance, people have said, why didn't Fury Clan Orc get in? I love the Fury Clan Orc. However, Gorthok is one that we definitely wanted to get in, right? Gorthok is an important character in the story, but not at that level of the A players, but he has a role to play. We also wanted to get Urku in there because he's from that original wave, and we wanted to get some of those in there. We're going to talk in a few minutes about kind of the breakdown of the waves. We already had 2 orcs in there. We've only got 20 to choose from, so 10% are already orcs. Throwing yet another orc in there is too much. It's going to take a spot from something else we may want to get in. And we just did a bunch of Fury Clan stuff with the Furious Four. The Krampus is red and stuff. So you get to a point where you say, you know what, maybe this year we're going to let Fury Clan Orcs sit out. We're going to make room for some of these other characters. So that comes into play as well, trying to get some different diversity of characters. So there is an actual variety. And I think that if you look at the post that people are saying about how they're voting, you see a lot of people vote. You see some people saying, oh, why would you ever vote for that? And there's other people that are like, yeah, that's what I want to vote for. That's the one that I want. So I think having that variety is actually important.
Yeah, and I mean, even if you're a big orc fan, if 3 orcs are there, or 3 of anything are there, probably none of them win because they split a vote and none of them get to the top. I do have a question with that, with somebody like Urku or Gorthok or Calavian especially. Mm-hmm. Does continually being in All-Stars and not winning have any impact in the decision to put them in a future All-Stars wave?
Not necessarily. If they are in the vote and they do really well, I like to put them in again. So I'm gonna tell you right now, here's my first pick, because I want to know who you're going to choose. Are you comfortable saying who your vote is tonight? I'm not going to hold
where I'm at right now. Yeah. Yep.
Okay. So my first pick of the All-Stars vote is who I think is going to take it. I think this character is going to win, and it's Calavian. I think that the time is right for that character. He's done really well the last few years. He's been in the upper level of votes. With the desire to have more of those red parts, Furious Four, like I just mentioned and stuff, I think this is the year Calavian wins it all. So to answer your question, someone that has been a perennial loser but has performed really well, they tend to get put back in to see if this is going to be their year. Romulus was the 4th place character in All Stars 4. He ended up being the top vote getter in All Stars 5. So you have stuff like that where we like to do that. But sometimes you get a character like Sir Owain that was, I think, the 3rd lowest or 4th lowest vote the year before he won. And then the year after, he becomes one of the top ones and he gets voted in. So there's always things that surprise you when you actually do the surveys.
Yeah, yeah, I'll get Clavian is also the first one I'm going to vote because I think he's the only skeleton I don't have, but also, so he's in the rarity and the money and such. But then now in my new approach to this hobby, I don't think I can recreate him the way that I want to. That's those that have the paint jobs that are pretty significant, even if it's all red and you can do it. I would rather get it the way it comes.
Yep.
And that's when I saw that he has lost in every All-Star vote. I was like, oh well, I hope the old dude makes it through this time so he doesn't he gets the big L on his head and scarlet letter.
I will tell everybody as well that Clavian and Sir Galeron are 2 figures that are way cooler in person than in any of the photos. I know a lot of people say Sir Galeron, that copperish armor color just doesn't come through in the photos. Clavian is another one, just the kind of sheen of his armor. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous looking figure. So those are ones that definitely, when people would get them in hand, I think that they would be very, very impressed. You just mentioned something that I want to talk about. So I want to bring this up. You shared this with me, but you also shared this in the Cabal before we went live. This is something that you put together. This is your voting guide. Now, if you're in the Cabal, Dub has made this available. He did some research. Talk us through what you were trying to put together here and how this impacts how you consider the vote.
Yeah. So first, the preface is everybody should vote just purely what they want for their collection. Purely, right? It's the easiest way to vote. Like, look at your collection. I want these. Great. That's what you should vote for. I saw a lot of folks asking about, hey, when was the last time this was released, or what are the ones that are the most expensive? And that information does enter my mind. And so I approach it the way I would approach work and go, okay, there is a way to rank these based on those factors. They may not matter to you, right? Mm-hmm. Whether you're an objective or subjective person. But so I went through and I said, okay, when did it come out? So how long has it been since you could buy this figure at retail? Is kind of the thing. And then what is it selling for on eBay? And it's hard with some of these because there maybe is one sold on eBay in 6 months.
Yeah.
And then kind of did a little, a little algorithm score just to say, okay, if I rank them based purely on, if I wanted to buy all of these, and I want to take advantage of the opportunity to get them at the lowest possible cost, here's the way I should vote. Purely based on that. Doesn't mean that's the way I'm going to vote, but that's what I looked at. And I tell you, some of that research is hard because they're just not available. But at the same time, Urku at number 1, would I like to have another Urku? Yeah, I'd be happy if he won. But I think he's a pretty low. There are just much nicer figures than him on this list that I also don't have. And even if he's $600, $700 on eBay, I don't want to pay the $100 for some of the other ones that I don't have. Mm-hmm. So it does muddy the waters a little bit. But I know a lot of folks, the reality is in collectibles, if our collectibles have no value, people stop collecting. So to everyone, there is a level of importance that your collection has some value. You may not prioritize it at all, but the hobby dies when there is no value. Everybody knows that. So I thought it would be a helpful tool for people who just need information. Also, a lot of new people that don't know that this has happened in 5 times and so forth.
Yep. So again, I absolutely love that breakdown that is in the Cabal. And I love the fact that Urku, according to all that data, is the number 1, because Urku is a figure that I hope to goodness does not win. I just don't think, comparatively to what's coming out today, it's that impressive a figure. Even back when I got it as part of All Stars 1, it was the orc that I liked the least. I loved Gorthok. I thought that figure was great. And even the Orc Legion builder, I liked better than the Urku. Urku had the bare chest, which was kind of cool, but the armor, that silver armor, for whatever reason, I never felt that it looked as good as some of the darker colored armor for the orc type characters. Now, when we get things like that orc deluxe builder pack that's part of the tactics wave, all of the parts that are in Urku plus many more are in that package. Yes, the colors are a little bit different in terms of the armor and stuff, but Urku being the number one based on rarity and price is one of the reasons why I tell people don't vote solely based on rarity and price. If there's a figure you would prefer that is technically less expensive on the secondary market, vote for that one. Because one of the things I think that we forget sometimes is there are people that it doesn't matter whether a figure is $600, $300, or $100, they're not going to buy it. So whether the figure is 300 or 100, to them, they are both as unobtainable because they're never going to buy them. So if they prefer that $100 figure, putting the vote in for that character ultimately makes more sense for them.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And also with you think about it sitting on a shelf, we've got, a couple retailers pretty close here that you can actually walk up and see Mythic Legions on a peg.
Mhm.
I'm blessed to have that because for a long time we didn't have it. I don't think a figure like Urku is going to move compared to just recent stuff. You think that's compared to the Alithia wave, the average person that doesn't know anything about Mythic Legions is certainly not going to pick that one because it's old. It's an old figure and it looks old, even though I still like to have it. I'm not going to lie, but it looks old. So I do agree with that.
So let me ask you this then. If not Urku, if you don't think Urku would have that shelf appeal where people would be like, oh, this is, because I agree with you, it doesn't show as well as some of the other ones. I got to give my man Curtis his due here. He's been ringing that bell for Gorthok. Gorthok is my second pick for this year's vote. Gorthok, if you want an actual orc, he's so unique compared to the other orcs. He's not just black. The fact that he's got that kind of like mottled skin with almost like those birthmarks on him. The armor color is really a unique kind of almost like pewter bluish color. Great overall figure. Also very rare and hard to find. Two heads. Urku just has that helmeted head, while Gorthok comes with the unhelmeted and the helmeted. So there's definitely some builder capabilities there as well. He's one that I think fans would be really happy getting in hand again.
Yeah, I'm with you on Gorthok. That's one of my votes too for that. Just like Clavian, I look at that paint job and go, I know I can't do that. I know I can't do that. But also, I think that's a big army build figure. The shadow orcs. I have the shadow elves. I wish there were more of those because those darker, more unique but still bright colors really pop on a Legion shelf because a lot of Legions are similar colored.
Yep.
And those are differentiators. I would love Gorthok I feel like he will. But who knows? Because he's been a number of times as well.
We're 2 for 2 right now. We're in sync here. I have to imagine we're not going to remain in sync for the other two. So I'm going to let you go first this time. Who is your final choice, at least right now, in that first group?
So I think it is going to be both are. I think I have a big lack of dwarves in my collection, but I have King Noglin because I got him at Toylanta. Y'all happened to had him on the booth at Toylanta.
You mean King Bromden?
Bromden. I'm sorry. Yes.
Okay.
So you had him on the booth there. So we picked him up. But so right now, even though I don't think he's necessarily as impactful, like Grisha, I love, but I have her. I have, I think, all but 9 of these, so it does limit down. I think a character like Thalon is a wonderful pick for this. She's an incredible figure, but I just have her, so it's not one that I would vote for. selfishly. But so I think I'm at both our Shadowhorn right now.
Okay.
But I certainly Sir Galerion is another big contender for the paint reasons, and
Mhm.
he's a relatively normal figure other than the really cool paint job.
Interesting. I've seen Bothar get a lot of love. He traditionally has not performed well in the vote. And I think, so we've got two dwarves in this vote, and you just compared the two of them, Bothar versus Bromden. You're not going to go Bromden because you got him somewhat recently.
He's
Bromden is
awesome.
a better figure in every way.
No doubt.
It's two head sculpts, one of which is a unique, face shown dwarven sculpt. It's got the shield, the axe, the sword, the hammer, soft goods. It's just overall a better figure. Bothar, I actually like the colors on Bothar. In the original Kickstarter, he was my favorite of all the dwarves, actually. I ended up liking Thord better once I had him in hand. But I really do like Bothar. But in retrospect, he's a perfect example, in my opinion, similar to Urku, of a figure that by today's standards and what's coming, I don't think they stand up as much. So if you're looking to complete a collection, if you're looking to add him, he is a very expensive figure. That is a smart vote if that's what's important to you. But as I said a few minutes ago, if you're looking for the better figure, even if you're looking for the better dwarf figure, I don't know that I would go that way.
Yeah. There's no doubt that Bromden is tremendous. That is a wonder, and comes with so much. And you could army build that figure, I think, pretty easily with the alternate portrait.
So I'm up in the air on my final one. What I do know is it's a 2.0. I really want to see a 2.0 figure get into the wave this year. 2.0 figures are, I'm a customizer. So that is one of the ways that I think some people choose these parts. Dorklair was saying this earlier, where he was saying, consider unique parts for these figures. If you have a lot of them, if you have all of them or whatever, and you are buying this specifically for extra parts, that is something to take into account. And what Dorklair was saying, which is, it's a good point, is some of those older 1.0 figures, their parts have been used so many times. And if you are a customizer, you probably have so many of those parts that you don't need those figures solely for those pieces. Unfortunately, that's one of the challenges of an all-star wave. Because it's reissues, you're not going to get any of the newest, coolest stuff. Even like the Alithia wave, some of the new parts in that, they're not represented at all in this wave here. There are some of the Irithyr parts. And this has been one of the things, Dub, that we've seen people push back on, saying that some of these Irithyr figures are too new to be all-stars. Have you seen those comments?
I have, yeah. And I mean, I won't lie. Right when I saw the list, I'm like Magnus, who is probably the best figure on this list, in terms of quality of the figure. I'm like, oh, didn't I just buy him? Like, I bought him at retail, so I feel like I just bought him. But I mean, even that, it has been a few years. It's not like it was 6 months ago. Time has moved very fast for us all recently. So I've seen those comments, but I think. Like what you explained earlier, that the pool is a lot narrower than you think with some of those early 1.0s, and it's good variety to have something for everybody. There's 20 figures, only 3 are going to win, so it's the 3 that are going to win are going to be, but there may be a great growing 2.0 fan base that wants to have an opportunity to vote for those, and I love the goblins are my favorites. I've got a ton of 2.0 figures.
I'll say this controversial statement. If Magnus were to win, I think we would sell more Magnus figures than we would sell Urku's. I think Urku is going to be, if he wins, which he very well may, he's a very expensive on the secondary market. A lot of people want to get him. I could see Urku falling into the same trap that Azar did. He's a checkbox. You get one because you want to have at least one in your collection, but his parts are not unique. You've got better looking orcs. You've got a lot of orcs. So people are like, I just need one Urku. Magnus, newer body parts, really cool color scheme, 2 different heads. He's someone that I could see people getting maybe a couple of because they don't have such a dearth of those parts and everything. So as new as Magnus may be, as cheaper, as less expensive as he is on the secondary market, I think that we'd sell more Magnus than we would actually sell Urkus.
That's interesting.
So my final pick is between two, and they are two of my favorite 2.0 figures, both of which are, I think, very, very underappreciated. One of them is As a Spirit Bender, the female summoner character who is part of the convocation of Basilia. And the other one is probably one of my favorites in the line, and it's who I'm probably going to get, who I'm probably going to put my vote to, and that is Grisha the Slitherer. I love that figure. I know some people don't love that head. That head with the almost like St. Basil's Cathedral dome on it is very divisive, but it's a great build. It's great colors. I've used it for a lot of pop and swaps and customs, so I think that's where I'm going to put my third vote.
Asa is the one that I'm considering from the 2.0 to vote for. I also think she's important, at least to me, with the Jin coming and having similar colors to as some of the Poxus Wave and these other things coming. I think it's a cool character to have, and I don't have it. That's certainly one that I'm considering too.
I saw people posing, like not posing, but doing Photoshop mock-ups actually of Calizair, the Jin, with Asa and with Grisha, because Grisha has a very Arabian Nights type feel to the character. I saw them posing them together, and they look awesome together. I actually have in my collection Asa and Grisha are together on the same shelf. I have two Asas. I have one with my kind of Middle Eastern type characters, and then I have one that's got the Max Bird custom robes with my convocation display as well. So you're right. I saw those two, and it's a great looking combination.
Yep.
Okay, so last question then on the voting. Who are you going with the Alumni?
Well, it's easy because Asterion is the only one I don't have, so that's the one I'll vote for. I think that I don't know. Pixis gets a lot of attention. Sir Ignatius certainly is very expensive on the aftermarket, and I have him right here. The paint is really nice,
gorgeous
on him. So, and he fits in with what's coming here soon, and it's hard.
So Sir Ignatius is my vote. Great looking figure. I have all those figures in the Alumni vote. Sir Ignatius is one that, again, photos do not do it justice. That pearlescent type armor is just wonderful looking. The reality is all four of those characters, never say never, they are unlikely to get 2.0 versions. It's none of them are lore-wise as important enough. I will say that if any of them got a 2.0, it would probably be Asterion, solely because Eric loves Minotaurs. They're like his favorite fantasy kind of character, like a creature type character. He loves Minotaurs. So I could absolutely see Eric wanting to take another stab at Asterion, not saying that's happening. But that is certainly part of my voting as well. The uniqueness of that Sir Ignatius armor color is why I'm going there. Your reasoning, because that's the one you don't have, that's iron. That's ironclad. I would totally, if there was only one in that group I didn't have, that would be my vote as well.
I don't think there's a bad vote. There's not a bad vote in any of these, but those are all great figures and very desirable for folks. So I love that you guys did that. I really do.
Cool. Yeah. So excited about these. Excited to see how it's going to break down. But the other thing that I wanted to talk about that I don't think people are really aware of, Dub, is back to that Magnus. Oh, Magnus and Vorthog, they're too new. One of the things, I actually ran the numbers, right? And it's interesting. So going back to Mythic Legions 1.0, that is a 34 figure wave. Any guess on how many figures in that wave have not actually already been done as all-stars or reissued in some format like reinforcements?
Oh, that have not been. 25.
Okay, good guess. It's actually much lower than that. It's only 12. It's only 12 of the 34 figures that have not had a reissue.
Wow.
Interestingly, if you break it down, of those 12, one of them was an exclusive. Sir Valgard was a Kickstarter exclusive. We already said we will not reissue him, so not eligible for All-Stars. 3 of them are Legion builders. So the Silver Knight, the Gold Knight, and the Gold Skeleton. We already talked about Legion builders not being in the vote. So that is 4 of the 12 that aren't eligible. 3 of them are major characters that are more likely to get a 2.0, and that is Urzok, Thord, and Otho. And then the last one that actually got a 2.0 version is Gorgo Etherblade. So if you break that down, it only leaves 4 characters: Bothar, Galeron, Urku, and Clavian,
They're
all of which are in the vote.
Wow.
So when you break it down like that, you really start seeing something you've said a number of times tonight, that the field is a lot narrower than you think it is.
And that probably as it continues as you get into the newer waves, I'm sure.
So 1.5 is 6 figures. 2 of them have never been reissued. Unkin, who's a PowerCon figure, we've long said that PowerCon debuts are not being reissued. So Unkin's out. That only leaves Sir Godfrey. We've done other Templars. We've done better Templars. So Sir Godfrey not getting it, it makes sense not to put him in, to have that spot for somebody else, because there have been so many other opportunities to get Templar characters and better Templar characters.
Yeah, Sir Godfrey is, I mean, that's just rare, but the Templars recently are much better.
That's what it is. He would be another one of those check off the box votes because you just want one. Covenant of Shadow, 4 of those have never been reissued. One of them is in this set. It's Gorthok. But of the 3 that didn't make it in, one of them is that Knight Builder Pack. So it's a different product category than we actually have in this vote, because there are none of those like big deluxe figures, at least at this point, that are in the vote.
Those Knight Builder Packs would make a lot of people happy if those showed up in some
I'm
sort.
sure they would. When you get to Advent of Decay is really where you start seeing the numbers. 43 figures in that wave, only 2 have been reissued. And you could argue that with me because one of them is Blue Hagnon. So you could say that Blue Hagnon is not technically a reissue. It's closer to a 2.0 version, or it's a new version than a reissue. If I acquiesce to that argument, then the only one in that entire 43 figure wave that's been reissued is the Goblin Legion builder as part of reinforcements.
Wow. Well, hence why 2.0 figures are going to be in these lists.
Yeah.
Eligible to be in these lists.
And then,
wow,
obviously it goes down from there. We don't have to go over every one, but Colosseum, Soul Spiller, Siege, Wasteland, and Arethyr. That's as far as we go. The only one of those waves that has nobody in the vote is Wasteland. Wasteland was only a 6 figure. None of those felt like it made sense. None of those are desirable enough that it made sense. I mean, 2 of them are PowerCon figures. One of them's an ogre, and the remaining 3, it just didn't make sense to throw them into this vote. But you can start seeing how we narrow this down. And then you're trying to get, like I said, a number of females. And I want a couple orcs. I want a couple dwarves. I want a couple goblins. Really, that field starts to build itself.
Is Rhaegor a figure that is eligible to be an all-star? I know it's a different kind of tribute.
It is, and thus far we have said no because it's weird. It's a weird kind of tribute because it was a tribute to a person that passed away.
Yeah.
So Lord Viserys is one of the ones that are in the vote. Lord Viserys is a tribute figure to my friend Joe Viteri, but Joe Viteri is thankfully still with us. So doing a figure, when that Rhaegor figure came out, it was a very different time in the line. They did that, as a bit of a tribute to Raymond Wu, who passed away. So bringing that back at this point is something that the studio has, at least thus far, felt like they didn't want to do. They didn't want to bring that back. They wanted it to be just that one time.
Yep.
Okay, let's see. I have a couple notes here, but The other thing too, as part of this, like I mentioned, is because of this variety, that's why certain characters like Fury Clan Orc and Red Shield Soldier and Halmer Golden Tooth, that's why some of them get left off this one, because there are other characters. Halmer Golden Tooth's a great example. That's a super cool figure, but we had these other two dwarves already in. Somebody's got to get cut at some point.
Do you think, and this may not be disclosed, you can't sell us this, but do you think the alumni is a new fixture in the voting, or is that a one-time thing?
Not necessarily, because I'll be frank with you, the alumni was really hard to do. Because most of the other Legion builders that have come out, so let's be honest, when you're doing the alumni vote, you're only doing 1 and 2. All-Stars 3 forward, none of those figures are hard enough to find now that they would ever compete for that title of an alumni. They would never, someone from All-Stars 3, would never beat an Asterion or, a Pixis or something like that. When you look at the other figures that have been in there, a lot of them are named characters. They're major characters. Scapular the Cryptbreaker, major character. Atlas, Attila. I mean, Attila just got a 2.0. So you get a lot of these characters that are very, very important. So they don't get to be in that vote. There are some others that certainly could have gone in. So will we do it in the future? It's definitely a possibility, but it's also not something that we've said, okay, going forward every single year, we're going to have an alumni vote.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess everybody needs to buy their Asterion when it wins at the highest level of sales volume, and then that way we get another one next year.
So, interestingly, with the big kind of group, that 20, that's a little bit harder, I think, to have this conversation. But at least with that alumni vote, I'm curious. I know who you want to win. Who do you think's going to win?
Oh, Ignatius, I think, is going to win pretty easily.
Really?
I think so. I think there's a lot of, you see. Well, I don't know. Again, the echo chamber, but you see all the discussion with the knights coming in the Necronominus wave and how he fits in really well with those, and plus the rarity. Pixis is popular. I don't know. Skeletons do always do well, and
they do, and that's. I think it's going to come down to Asterion and Pixis, personally. That Asterion's a great looking figure. If you don't have it, which a lot of people don't, it's something a lot of people want. And while we've done a couple other Minotaurs, they're much more stylized. This one feels, with the exception of the fact that a number of people have argued that he should be larger, that he should be, if not ogre scale, at least brute scale might be nice. My personal opinion is it's going to come down to Asterion and Pixis.
I don't think the vampire has much of a chance.
I think the vampire is going to be the lowest vote getter of them. I think that he's a perfect example, like we were talking about, that there have been some newer characters in that race classification that have come out that I think have been better than Carpathius. So I don't think he's got the nice shiny black armor, but so does the Black Knight Legion builder. So he's one that I think is going to be the lowest vote getter.
Yeah, I really will be interested. I wonder if things can talk about like how close that vote is versus how close the top vote is.
Sure.
The regular All-Star. I think that would be interesting to see, because it does feel like that one could get incredibly competitive and not have a true clear winner.
In the top vote, in the last few years, numbers 1 and 2 have been definitive, like almost right out of the gate, like within 15 minutes of votes starting to come in, I can tell you who's going to win and who's going to come in number 2. That third vote is the one that has flip-flopped. A few years ago, Scaphoid, so if the one that Scaphoid got in, Scaphoid ended up beating Ilgar on the last day. Like, Ilgar was in the 4th place the entire vote, but Scaphoid just kept climbing and climbing. But we always look for, like, if someone just climbs crazy numbers overnight, we know that there's a problem. We've never had that type of problem. Scaphoid was in 5th place, and he just slowly, crept up and crept up and crept up, and he ended up beating Ilgar by just a handful of votes. Similarly, last year, the character that came in fourth place, because last year we had 3 winners, was only a handful of votes. I think it was under 10 votes that separated the one that made it and the one that didn't.
Wow, that's really close, because I'm sure there's quite a number of people that vote for this, I would imagine.
Yeah, there's a big number. We get a really good turnout on the votes overall, and like I said, it gives us some really good information about what the fans actually want to see. And it's interesting too, because it goes back to that echo chamber conversation. For all of the people that talk about how popular dwarves are, they don't perform well. They don't perform well in the votes. They don't perform well in sales. They're never the lowest ever, but they're never the top. And I know that upsets the dwarf fans, but the numbers don't lie. That is what it is. If you want to prove me wrong, buy more dwarfs.
It feels like the skeletons are who always perform really well. At least that's the way it feels.
Since day one, skeletons and knights have been 2 of the highest performing in the line. Barbarians tend to be very popular as well. But then you also have characters that don't really have strong classifications that are just hugely popular. From the Paxus wave, Thrace Wraithhaler was a massively popular figure.
Huh.
The only classification you could really put her in would be female figures. She outperformed literally every female figure we've done. She was super popular. So you do get weird characters like that. Goblins are not always the most popular. They're like dwarves, kind of middle of the pack. Goblin Legion Builder was a massive, massive seller. People crazy stocked up on that one. So you do get those outliers here and there, but by and large, you can make some kind of classifications in terms of what tends to do better. And yes, you're right, skeletons would be at the top of that list.
Are you talking about the deluxe Goblin Legion Builder?
No, the original.
Really? I thought it was
Legion Builder.
I thought it'd be the Turtle Shield.
The Day-Wave, that one was a massive seller.
Wow, that's interesting. Actually, I thought the Turtle Shield would have been the one bringing all the folks in. I love that Turtle Shield with the deluxe.
Yeah, I like that one too, and that one had the crossover kind of sales of it's basically a dwarf buck. So you had some dwarf fans who were able to get it for that as well. But no, even in that wave, I can tell you in that wave, the Dark Templar was like light years more popular than everything else. He was the best seller in that wave.
It feels like Templars always do well. That's really the only Legion builder, the standard Templar, that is hard to get still, and you got to pay a lot for. Most every Legion builder you can get pretty close to what it sold for originally.
Yeah. The Templars are always popular. You know what's funny? What's interesting is one of the strengths of Legions is the fact that it's not, even though there's a storyline and everyone knows we're working on a book and the game is coming out and stuff, the fact that it doesn't have like a definitive story that's been presented through a movie or something like that allows people to kind of have their own headcanon for a lot of this stuff. So the fact that it's not tied into anything that they know and are concrete is a strength. But I will tell you that any of the figures that have a historical context, any of the Mercurians that look like Spartans, any of the Templar Knights, characters that have a tie into the real world, they always do really well.
Yeah, with that Pixis, I saw somebody post the bringing Pixis back to life with that armor on it, and I was like, oh, that looks really good. Even though I have a Pixis, I wouldn't hurt my feelings. That looks really good.
It's exactly what they do. They swap out those bone pieces. You throw in some flesh limbs from a barbarian figure, and you immediately have another Mercurian for your army, a living Pixis, as they like to say.
Yeah. Now, speaking of skeletons, Jeremy, are you going to give us any tidbits of the other side of this pending wave here?
I will. So I'm not going to give you I'm not going to spoil anything.
No.
But Yeah, one of the things that we did last year with All Stars 5, All Stars has always been a very challenging wave for us, very challenging part of the line. Because while fans absolutely love it, I've said before that it's not as well liked at the studio level for a very specific reason. It doesn't introduce anything new to the line. Um, these figures that we're talking about, Bothar and Urku, they use parts that were released, 8 years ago, 9 years ago, or whatever. They were solicited. So, with so much advancements in the line, to take a whole wave and just reissue stuff that is not as good as the new stuff you're putting out. And I don't say that. It's hard for me, especially as, an agent of the studio, to say things like, "Oh, these figures are not good." And I'm not saying they're not good, but like anything else, you want us to get better, right? You want us to keep growing. You want to open these new figures and say, "Goodness, every time I open one, every time I open a wave, it's better than the wave before." We work hard to make that happen. So because of that, All Stars never introduced new things until last year. Last year, when we did the plus format and we added these new characters, that brought brand new stuff into the line. Now, in All Stars 5, those new characters, Dubon, Xylernian Guard, two figures that people are loving, Lady Averona, Swig, none of those were created like from scratch during a design process when the parts were sculpted. Those were all extra parts that were sculpted during other sessions. The
No.
Dubon head was sculpted during the Irithyr wave along with Magnus. The Lady Averona, that part, that mask, I mean, that uses the head from Hadriana. That additional mask piece was sculpted at that time. So that design process was putting out all of the pieces that hadn't been used and creating characters. This wave, All Star 6, is a little different because these characters were planned out. The parts were planned out, and some of the characters were planned out during the Necronominus actual wave creation last year. So at the end of G-Con last year, we did the stinger that we said Necronominus will continue, that 2023 is the year of Necronominus, and All-Star 6 will see a continuation. So what we're going to see in addition to our 4 winners is very much a continuation of the types of things we saw in Necronominus. But I will tell you, Dub, don't think these are B-sides. Don't think that these are characters that weren't good enough to be in the Necronominus wave. You're going to see some stuff in this wave that is going to blow your mind. And they absolutely could have been. They were good enough to get in the Necronominus wave. So we didn't split them from the best and the second best. We just tried to have some variety and split them up so both waves would have some absolutely amazing new products for fans to get excited for.
This will be a good sized wave then.
Yes, this will be a good sized wave. It's smaller than Necronominus. I will tell people that. I can't reveal exactly how many there are at this time, but it is a bit smaller than Necronominus. But there's going to be some very cool stuff in there. There's going to be some surprises in there. I think people are going to be excited. And like I said, if you like Necronominus, you're going to like this wave because it is very much a continuation, both of the kinds of characters and the story that we are telling with this actual wave here.
I'm very excited. As you have gone through the different, the Horsemen and kind of the versus format of these recent waves, are you learning more about, like, from a faction perspective, what's more popular than others, or does it turn out that way when you see the sales?
Yeah, I mean, there are certain types of characters that are more popular than others. I've long said that my personal favorite factions are the Noble Bear and the Red Stars, and it's largely because they're catch-alls. Like, anything can be in either of those waves because it's a group of thieves and mercenaries and assassins, and it's a group of misfits and barbarians and just outcasts. Anybody can be in those waves. Whereas when you do a fact like Necronominus, I love the Necronominus wave. I like the undead and the skeletons. But if you don't like skeletons, that's probably not going to be your favorite faction, right?
Yep. Yep.
So we do learn those things, but I will say that we really haven't learned anything in years that we didn't already kind of know. Like the popularity of certain kinds of characters has been fairly consistent throughout. And then, as I mentioned, with a character like Thrace, there are always those surprises that come out, and you're like, wow, that one really hit harder than I expected. And there's also characters that perform a lot less than you thought, that they don't find an audience. Those tend to be the sleepers, right? We get those in the wave where, because everything we do is based on pre-order, it's this interesting scenario where the most popular ones are the ones that are produced in larger numbers. But when they come out, so there's more of them out there. The less popular ones are produced in smaller numbers. But by definition, when the wave comes out and people are like, oh, I want to get some more, they want the ones that they skipped. Usually the ones they skipped are the less popular ones, which is why they were less popular. But now there's fewer of them to go around. So that's why you see characters that are less popular suddenly become super desirable. You mentioned Thalon Frostbow earlier, right?
Yep.
Great figure, correct?
Yes.
That was such a peg warmer. I know we don't have peg warmers because we're not really on pegs in a lot of cases, but that was a figure that when she came out with Soul Spiller, she was on Big Bad Toy Store forever. I know retailers that they couldn't get rid of that figure. It just stuck around forever. Fast forward a few years later, that figure is selling traditionally on eBay for, $100-something. It's super desirable and it's super beloved now. It's a weird turn of events how that happens.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. I mean, and it is a supply and demand. New people come in. I want the old ones. But I think some of those characters like the Shadow Elves and Thalon, I hope that there are more Frosts and Shadows and Dark and those kind of variant species, because they're fun, but it's hard. Where does she fit? I mean, even when I just was redoing my shelves, I'm like, I guess I just put her with the rest of my elf, but where do I put her? Like she doesn't necessarily fit with all of the flock, even though she's in the flock, because she's different color scheme and so forth.
Yeah. It's what you said there is something that we are well aware of. And it's just, there's only so many spots. People have been saying for a long time, Shadow Elves need more love. Frost Elves, the fact that we introduced a Frost Elf in Thalon and don't have any other Frost Elves. We're aware of all that. It's finding where can we put them. It's why something like the Furious Four with the Legions concept was such a nice thing, because as I've long said, there was zero chance that we ever would have gotten 5 additional Fury Clan characters in the main line. We might have gotten one, maybe one with an alternate head, so it's kind of 2. But to be able to flesh out a subrace like that a place like Legions Con is a great place to do it. So I'm not saying that's what we're getting this year, but definitely what you're asking for, those additional representations of some of these subraces, it's absolutely on our list of things we want to get to.
Yeah, so Shadow Elf 2-pack confirmed. Second Legions Con exclusive.
People are very, very anxious for that second Legions Con exclusive reveal. All I can say is we have a plan. We know when we're going to reveal it, and you'll know as soon as we do, because we will sound that horn and let everybody know.
Now, I have to ask, I'm sitting, Natalie and I were watching Succession, which is our current favorite show on TV. And I sat there and I pause it and I start rewinding. She's like, "What are you doing?" And I look like the Leonardo DiCaprio meme sitting out of my chair. I'm like, that is Cosmic Legions right there on that screen. Just no, it's not. I'm like, I'm telling you, it's the thing we saw at Toyland. And I got out with the phone and showed her the picture. So I posted it, and then you're like, yeah, that is definitely it. I just think is amazing. Okay. And I think I saw CB say also that there's even some other cosmic figures like on the shelf there.
Yes.
How did that come to be?
So let me bring this up right here. So what Dub is talking about is on this week's episode of the HBO show Succession, which I should let everybody know this is rated TV mature and everything. We are, this is a family friendly show.
Very.
Family friendly line. This is definitely not family friendly. Great show.
No.
So a lot of people may know that we share studio space with a company called BB Props. So BB Props is a company that does film, like props for film, for television, for Broadway shows. We work with them very closely when there are things that are needed that are more in our wheelhouse than theirs. We help out with that and we participate. We've done at the shop a number of pieces for, television, a lot of late night shows like Saturday Night Live and so forth. We've done a number of actual TV shows like Severance on Apple TV, Succession, and Broadway shows and everything. So the way this happened was they contacted BB Props and they needed some props. They wanted some stuff. They said, there's going to be like a science fiction or they said there was going to be a movie that they were making and they wanted like examples of things from the movie, like merchandise from the movie. So those guys came down to us and they said, dude, this is what they're looking for. So I got put in touch with them and I was working with one of their production people over there and we sent them, a whole bunch of pictures. Joe Vasapolo took a bunch of pictures of stuff that we had available and we sent them all these things that we had that we could give them. They borrowed all of it. This was around last Legions Con, actually, to the point that we had to say, okay, you can take it, but you've got to bring it back for this weekend and then you can take it again. So they borrowed a bunch of stuff and we had no idea how it was going to be used, if it was going to be used, when it would be. We didn't know anything until our phone started blowing up on Sunday night with people saying like, oh my goodness, is Thygor on Succession? And we were like, yeah, he's there. So people saw the screen caps. I saw your post of the screen cap and yeah, that's pretty much how it came up. There are, to CB's point, in addition to Thygor, you can see right here Thygor on that table. But in addition to Thygor on the table, they kind of quickly go by. There's a shelf of stuff there, and you can see Slog on the shelf. And it looks like a mythic figure. They took a bunch of cosmics and mythics, so I don't know exactly what made it on the shelf, and I don't know if we're going to see them in subsequent episodes, but there certainly were things there beyond just the Thygor bust.
Yeah, so they're making a movie. I think it's called Callispatron 2. I think they're kind of doing a parody on Disney or whatever.
Ooh.
And it's stuck in a production nightmare and they can't get the CG right. That's kind of a big through line right here. And so that's when I saw it at first, I'm like, well, that has to be what it is. That's the Callispatron or whatever, make believe character. It is. I want that now. Now I want that specific one. That because now it crosses over two of the things I like.
So Mr. Vasapolo said people will want to keep watching. So there we go.
I don't even know the feeling that I had. I felt proud. I don't know what it was. It was such a weird feeling.
It was awesome for us to see all these Legions fans, because obviously we didn't say anything about it. We weren't allowed to say anything about it, actually. It was awesome to see the community just blow up and say like, oh my goodness, like, I kind of feel that because the community is so tight-knit and because we are so accessible, that a lot of our fans felt like it was a success for them as well, which is super cool because they were like, that's something that means something to them to see it on screen. It's like Thygor went Hollywood and I'm proud of him because of that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It helps, what we do is looked a certain way by some people, but certainly not Hollywood. And there's a thing in Hollywood and you're like, wow, look, we've made the big time, boys. We are here. That's our representative there on an Emmy show.
It
It's a great,
is.
it's a great show,
It,
by the
it,
way.
it was
Very
definitely
mature.
very cool. It was cool. It was very cool to be considered, and this is amongst, they did a prop last year for a Broadway play called August Wilson's The Piano Lesson. And that actual piano that they created, that, Bill Mancuso in the studio did all this digital sculpting and it was 3D printed, that actually was sent to the Smithsonian. So the fact that a piece of Bill's work and the studio's work is sitting in the Smithsonian, that's amazing. And this is something similar like that, where it's just this, weird turn of events that led to this. So to be able to see it there on screen, yeah, very cool and rewarding.
It is. I'm proud of him making the journey.
Now, we've talked a lot about Mythic tonight, but you, I assume, are also going to be all in on Cosmic. This is a line that you can get in on the ground floor, and you got to see a number of these figures at Toylanta. Tell me a little bit about your impressions of those figures.
Yeah, so I've got first. My impressions are they are much better in hand, and they look great in pictures. But the ones that we got to see in hand are just so nice. I have full all ins of 2 and 3, but I didn't all in on wave 1 for that exact reason. Like, okay, like I don't have any space. What am I gonna do? And then once wave 2 came out, I'm like, oh, I'm absolutely in on this. Like this is where I'm at. The colors, especially the recent ones, is Axios that is now with the retailers. Seeing those painted samples were just tremendous. But the size of these and the new parts, at least they look new to me. I think they're going to be great, and I think you'll probably get a different audience too. I think a lot of Mythic fans will be with Cosmic, but I think that's going to strike a different audience because the Cosmic world of other collectors, Star Wars Black Series or whatever, it's a lot easier to fit random alien into your collection than it is Mythic stuff.
Absolutely. I agree with what you're saying. I have long said that I see a really high ceiling for Cosmic for the exact reason you mentioned. I think when Mythic came out, it filled a gap because there were no like high quality, high fantasy figures. We've said this time and time again. Toy Biz and their amazing and expansive Lord of the Rings line, that hadn't been out for a number of years. And because it was so specifically Lord of the Rings, there was a gap. Mythic Legions filled that. And we're seeing a lot of other companies that are coming in and they're now doing fantasy type figures and mounts and so forth as well. So that I think is different than what we're seeing with Cosmic, because there's no shortage of science fiction figures. There's tons of franchises and figures that are out there. But to your point, if you want characters to put in your cantina or to help man your starship or your space pirates or whatever, these are characters that I think fans are going to be able to say, wow, that's a really cool toy. I don't know what it is. I don't need to collect them all, but I want these 2 figures simply because they will fit in on my toy shelf amidst my other stuff.
Is it the Greyborn? Is that their name?
Yep.
The alien. So those, right, the first time I saw them, I looked at I'm a big X-Files guy growing up.
Okay.
Probably the first TV show I loved. And I've got a Diamond Select Mulder and Scully. I'm like, oh, I mean, we're just setting that picture up with a bunch of those. They look like the aliens could be from X-Files.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, I know everyone's waiting for news on the shipping. All I can tell you is it's coming. I mean, the news is coming. We're dotting our I's, we're crossing our T's, but very, very soon we are going to have some good news for everybody on Cosmic Legions 1 and shortly thereafter Cosmic Legions 2. So stay tuned. And yes, there's news coming on Poxus as well. All of these things are moving along very, very well.
With Cosmic 1 and with the Aether Blade, which I know falls into kind of a different category, and then Poxus, are those the waves that kind of get you out of the various challenges that COVID presented in production schedule? You know, because it feels like that's kind of at the tail end of things start getting more normal when you get beyond those waves. It can be more regularly expected, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, some of the stuff. So one of the things that I've certainly learned now that I'm, on this side of the table is the minute you solve one challenge in this process, it, another challenge is going to rear its head and say, my turn. So the COVID challenges, they definitely still remain, but they clearly have gotten better. One of the challenges we had, for instance, with Poxis is we are starting to try to do things to spread some things out a little bit, like with tooling. So the tooling part of the process, actually cutting the steel molds, that's one of the pieces that takes the longest and has the most opportunity to set you back. Many of our delays historically have been because of delays in the tooling process. So we are doing things, or we've been doing things to minimize those future delays. Some of the things that we've done that have delayed us now are going to pay off dividends in future waves because we have better capabilities and we're not going to have such a bottleneck for some of this stuff. So yes, some of the COVID things, this will hopefully get us past that. We are trying to get to that point, and we said this before and haven't been able to get there yet, but not for a lack of trying, that, we really want a wave that has no new tooling to go from pre-order to in people's hands in like 7 to 9 months. We want a wave that has a lot of new tooling to get into people's hands something like 9 to 12 months. So we want to start to shorten that. And we have done things to help with that. Example.
All Stars 5 was in that timeline, right? It was pretty quick.
Yeah, All Stars 5. I mean, All Stars 5 got moved up because of the delay with Cosmic 1. We had that gap, so we moved All Stars up. So yes, All Stars Trolls and All Stars 5 were definitely within that shorter window. But I mean, even some of the things that we're doing now is we showed from the Necronominus wave. Did you see the pictures we showed of the test shot of the knight with like the articulation and stuff?
Yes. Yeah.
That's a test shot. That's much earlier in the process than you would traditionally see test shots from us. It's because that figure was completed, the sculpture was completed digitally months before the Necronominus reveal, and we sent it right over to the factory so we could get a bit of a head start on tooling some of that. So expanding the capabilities, getting things to the factories earlier, these are all part of our process as we try to shorten that window and really get to a point where there's more of a steady stream of this stuff coming through and being delivered.
Well, it feels like we've got the faucet will be opened here pretty quickly in the coming months with Cosmic and Poxis and everything that is to come. So that's, once that arrives, then it's exciting. Then you just got to find space for everything, which none of us have.
It is. That's the critical part. I mean, I'm looking around. I bought 2 new decals recently. I think I told this story, but for my birthday this year, my wife said, "What do you want?" And I said, "I want 2 new display cases, and I don't want you to complain that I want 2 new display cases." And she laughed and she said, "Yeah, no problem." So I got 2 display cases, and they instantly filled. Like, I didn't add new things. I didn't buy a whole bunch of new stuff to fill them. I just kind of moved some stuff around. I allowed certain displays to be less crowded, and they were completely full. So I'm still no better off figuring out where I'm going to put all these cosmic things, but it's a fun problem to have.
My Alexa just turned all my lights off. There we go. Now we're back.
I was like, it's funny because I have my screen here with you on it, but I have the camera up here. So when I'm talking, I tend to look at my camera, and I looked down and the screen was black, and I was like, what happened? What happened to Doug?
All the lights are on different smart switches and stuff. And so at 9 o'clock, they say, all right, enough playing. You got work tomorrow. That's what they turn themselves off. I had to program myself, so I leave the room.
So Curtis is saying, Legions Con 2022, I had a time of my life. I never felt that way before. It's so true. I owe it all to Jeremy. Well, thank you very much, Curtis. But, I know we're coming up on time, Dub, but I want to ask you, you will be at Mythic Weekend this year, correct?
I will. The whole family. We're all coming for Mythic Weekend, and we're very, very excited about it. We're actually going to drive so that we have the ultimate flexibility out from Atlanta. To have a vehicle and buy whatever we want to buy, and you don't have to worry about flying at home. And even coming, a day early and leaving a day later, so that any hanging out dinners. I mean, the community of this hobby is what it's all about. And so coming to that weekend, I think we're very excited for, but also to let the girls see, kind of behind the scenes on some things. And I think that'll be just really, really, I'm very excited. If it's anything like what just the fractured kind of corner conversations or small get a coffee is like at the other shows, I think it's going to be amazing. So we're very excited for that.
It's a unique experience. I know that having met your family at Toylanta, I'm super excited for them to be able to see the studio and see the creative side of the things that go on there as well. It's going to be something special. I mean, and it's amazing. One of the things I love about Mythic Weekend, especially someone like yourself who gets to go to the entire, because if you just come for Legions Con, it's amazing. But if you are fortunate enough to be one of those selected for intern, getting to go and do intern and then G-Con, it's like 2 amazing days. And then you sit back and you go, Legions Con hasn't even started yet. Like, I just had 2 incredibly immersive days. My head is spinning, and the con hasn't begun. It's awesome.
I can't wait. I can't wait. We love just cons and experiences and people in general. And so to be in a very devoted fandom like this, I think will be great. And I'm grateful that it's something I can do with my family. We're in the middle of our pop and swap. We actually have almost finished our customs, which we're having a lot of fun with. Writing bios and all that. It's great. And so we'll, in fact, I don't know if Carvar is still in the chat, but he told us I think he's setting up as a vendor and he's going to have his dioramas. He's like, bring your customs from this and set them up on my dioramas. I'm like, that's awesome. I'm not sure they'll be worthy of all the other things there, but that's awesome.
Are you in a rush? Do you got to get going?
No, I'm good. I got plenty of time.
I do want you to ask you another question because I want it on camera and I want it recorded so everyone can hear it and you can't back out. Toylanta this past year, we had a great time. It was our first time there as a studio. I said to a number of people where they said, hey, will you be back next year? And I said, I don't know. The show was great, but it really depends on, what other shows we want to do. We want to spread it out. I think it's safe to say that we're going to be back at Toylanta. It was a ton of fun. The crowd was great. But additionally, a promise was made that if we go back to Toylanta next year and we come down a day early, somebody's going to treat us to some homemade barbecue.
Right here at the house. You guys are welcome, and we'll have a cookout and we'll do it up. Yeah, 100%. That is a promise. Yes.
Well,
yes. It'll be better than wherever y'all went. That seemed to be disappointing.
Yes, we did get barbecue. We got in late. We walked in like 5 minutes before they closed. So I will say that it wasn't bad. It wasn't the best barbecue any of us had ever had, but we'll give them a little bit of a pass because we were coming in right at their end of their day, but definitely not home cooking. So we are looking forward to that next year. Yeah, here's Joe in the chat saying barbecue. Come on, Joe. Yeah, that was a great show. That was a lot of fun. The community down there was really positive, really receptive to us. Seeing what kind of a turnout we got last year, I can only imagine that going back in 2024 is just going to be even more exciting and even better as, the word starts to spread. We had multiple people come up to our table and buy like 15, 20 figures, and they had never purchased a Mythic Legions. They were just in the moment and they were excited. And, we saw them posting afterwards, and they were like, it wasn't like, that they regretted their purchase, that these were impulse purchases. They were like, what did I do? They were genuinely excited to be able to get these figures as part of that experience.
I know the folks, and myself and my buddies' comment sections and the guys messaging us on social media. Everybody that picked one up is picked more up, and they're, hey, how can I get this one? How can I get that one? I'm like, well, that one you may have to wait on a little bit. Look forward, don't look backwards. Look forward. Everybody seems excited, and I love that. Like Seth, who's never painted anything before, I see him painting, and
Yep.
I just think it's great that it encourages you. I think I said it in my whatever I named that video, how to collect Mythic Legions. It makes you feel like you actually get to play with your toys, and ultimately, that's what we all kind of are hearkening back to, right? The days we sat on the floor surrounded by stuff. When you and Joe had that cosmic day the other day, and you showed that picture of just hearts everywhere. I'm like, that's what every one of our playrooms or floors or rooms used to look like. And how great is it that we get to do that with this? Now, I haven't got to the place where a one I only have one figure of that I'm willing to harvest parts off of that. I haven't crossed that line, but I think it's coming. Like, I'm gonna get a tackle box of heads and hands. Is what's gonna happen.
There are certain figures that are not in my collection because they were ones that I didn't love, and I had an idea that needed them, so I made that sacrifice. And there are others that I like, and there have been times. There was a point that I didn't have a Black Knight in my collection, and I didn't realize I didn't have a Black Knight in my collection. Like when reinforcements came out, of those like 6 figures, I didn't have like 4 of them in my collection. I had pieces from those 4 spread throughout my collection. But yeah, you definitely get to the point where you get these ideas, and just to scratch that itch, you're like, I'm sorry, man, you've got to get pulled apart. I'll find another one of you down the road.
I see Legends Collector. Yeah, you can message me and whatever questions you need. I see that in the chat. So, do you have one of every released Legion in its original form? No,
I do not.
Do you have any that you are after still?
No, at this point, there's nothing that I don't have that I really, really want. I recently came across a Coliseum orc, and I just didn't have one on display. I didn't have one anymore because I pulled it apart. So I said, "Oh, you know what? I'll throw this up." So I have that one there. I've done that in a few instances, but for the most part, the figures that I don't have in their original form are ones that I'm okay not having them. Eric likes, whenever anyone asks me what my least favorite Legion is, you've got to pick one, right? They're asking me a question. I have to answer it. So my go-to has always been the gold skeleton. And Eric Treadaway likes to make fun of me, like repeatedly, about how we should just do a bunch of gold skeletons because I don't like them. But that's one that I don't have in my collection. So there's no one I'm looking for, but if I stumble upon one and I don't have it, I'd probably buy it just to put it out and display. I will say there's probably only maybe 8 figures in the entire run that I don't have out in their original form.
Yeah, that's hard because that's everything else that I display is all the way it comes. I haven't done this ever. I've never even swapped a weapon or anything. It's probably a brain thing, but it's fun. I mean, it genuinely is fun. I was curious, looking at your collection over the years. I'm like, I wonder if he's just ripped apart all of them, or does he have a little section that's like, here's the original form, here's the base form.
So I've put some back. I did not have an Otho in original condition for years, but I had Otho's head on another custom. And I hadn't painted it. It was untouched. It was just popped it on another custom. And I had his body parts. I had his tunic on one custom and his arms and legs on another. So everything was untouched. And I didn't do that intentionally because when I ripped apart Otho, it wasn't an expensive figure. But a couple years, about a year and a half ago, I realized that I didn't have an Otho on display, but I had all the parts. So I did put them back together, and I now have an Otho. And actually, somewhat recently, when I got those new cases, I rearranged some of my displays a little bit because I had never put stuff on display based on factions. Like I had Scapular with my skeletons as opposed to having a Sons of the Red Star group. So I stepped that back a little bit, and I actually did like cases based on each individual faction. So that allowed me to, put some figures where they actually go. And it made it so some of those figures I didn't have on display, but I had in pieces, I kind of wanted to reassemble.
That's interesting. I have it that way too. And even just this time, I'm like, ooh, should I put them in faction? And then I'm like, do I have enough cubes for that?
Yep.
Displaying is an important part of the hobby.
Rhaegor was another one. Rhaegor I had in pieces, and I put them back together to actually put a Rhaegor on display.
Oh, I can take that one from you if you need me to.
Is he one? So let me ask you then, you've mentioned the few that you're looking for in the All-Stars wave. Who's real high on your list of figures that you want to complete ones in your collection?
Rhaegor and Bog Goblin are both very high. Bog Goblin because it's the only goblin I don't have, and I know I can make it. And I watched your video, and I'm gonna do that.
Yeah, but you want original? I get it. Totally get it.
Rhaegor is probably the highest, and he's the only kind of tribute-y type figure I don't have, and I like. There's stories behind them that I like and I appreciate. So that I think those are probably the two highest on my list. If I because I have.
So you've got the Otho then.
I don't, but he's not terribly high on my list. The human characters are
okay.
I'm the very first thing I can ever remember in my life is my older sister reading The Hobbit to me. So orcs and goblins and elves are the law. I mean, and that's 40 years of that kind of fandom. So if you ever made hobbits, that would be a problem.
So we've said before, because it's interesting that we've got the 1.0 and we went a little smaller with females and elves and goblins, but we've said before that we want to go down even smaller. We want to do halflings and pixies and stuff like that. I mean, personally, that's something I love, the size variety that we get in the line, the scale variety. And it seems like we always talk about getting bigger and bigger, but I'm very excited for the smaller stuff. It's why on a, creative level, I created those mouse and gnome kits with Wolf King Customs because I wanted some smaller characters in my display, gnomes and so forth.
I would I have said for the last at least 5 years that if the Horsemen were ever to get the Lord of the Rings license, it would be the end of the pocketbook for me. But just halflings, hobbits, I think smaller characters, they just help round out the display and give you more storytelling options. And I think that would be
absolutely great. Well, what I will say to leave you is, you're talking about storytelling. We are coming up on an interesting point for the Mythic Legions line. And it's interesting that just as Cosmic Legions is going to be starting to hit and that story's starting to begin, Mythic Legions is actually wrapping up its first story arc. So this Rise of the Dark Four, this is what we've been building to for this entire run of the figures from the very, very beginning. The book that we are working on is called Rise of the Dark Four. So this is our first arc, but we've heard a number of people very silly say, that, Mythic Legions is going to end once Necronominus is done. Once all the Four Horsemen are out, they're gonna stop Mythic Legions, and nothing could be further from the truth. We have very detailed plans about what comes next. And, all I can say is, as someone who's fortunate enough to be involved on the creative side of this, and as a massive fan of all of this stuff, the story in this line, there is so much more to explore. New races, new factions, new parts of this, realm that we've yet to explore. So there's a ton more to come. And whether you are just in it for the figures or in it for the lore or in it for both, I think you're going to be very, very excited in the coming years.
Yeah, I guess G-Con will get a good peek at something here coming up in a few months. That's in the book.
This is the end. G-Con is going to be part of us ending this arc, but there's still a lot of story to tell in this arc, and like I said, well beyond.
And I know the book, we're definitely excited about it. Trying to create good bios for the characters we're making, and going back and reading through the stories and some of the figure in-depth articles and stuff. I'm like, there really is a very strong story here that is just in a bunch of single paragraphs at times. That it'll be nice to get some sort of comprehensive way to ingest it. Looking forward to that.
It'll be very nice. Well, Dub, thank you so much. I have absolutely enjoyed this conversation this evening. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you'll come back in the future, because this has been really fun.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. Thanks for having me on. And just the welcoming from the studio and the community means a lot to us.
Absolutely. And, on behalf of the studio, thank you so much for ringing that bell and for spreading the word on Legions. We had a ton of people in the chat tonight and watching live. I know that a big part of that are your viewers. So if you are one of Dub's viewers and you are checking me out for the first time, thank you very much for spending your evening with me. Or if you're catching it on replay, thank you very much. Hopefully you enjoy the content, and you will check out some of my other videos, some of my other Mythic conversations. Dub, hang out in the green room. I'm going to play my little outro video, and then we can wrap it up, okay?
See you, everybody.
I'll be back here next week, unless things change. I'm going to have another guest with me next week, and we are going to be talking Mythic Legions tactics figures. I will see everyone then. Good night.